Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Virginia Pederson, and I'm super excited to be hosting the SERMAPod today. I am a sports, entertainment, and hospitality risk management focused lawyer in the Houston office of Meyer LLP. I'm also very excited to be joined today by Seth Myers, who is Associate Corporate Counsel for Intersport, a global sports organization that many of you are going to be familiar with. I want Seth to tell us a little bit about himself here in a second, but before we do that, we are actually here today to discuss the risks and liabilities associated with the very tragic accident that happened over the weekend with legendary quarterback John Elway's agent and former business partner, Jeff Spurbeck in California. So before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Seth, and what Intersport does and what your role is there?
I love how you kind of described yourself as working, both in the hospitality event, sports and entertainment space from a risk management and legal side, because that's pretty much what I do in house at Intersport. We do a little bit of everything at Intersport. So I like to call us an everything sports and entertainment agency, from assisting out with the James Beard Foundation Culinary Awards to working with big partners on activations in the traditional agency sense in sports and media, such as like a Dos Equis brand or a Heineken, all the way to having some of our own events that we do, like the World Champions Cup Champions Tour sanctioned event. So I specifically work in what we call our golf vertical, which spans everything from some premium hospitality that we do for our clients across all of the major golf events. We have a premium hospitality offering in Augusta, Georgia, for when the big weekend happens out there. As well as some of those other golf events we do, the PGA Tours, Rocket Classic for Rocket Mortgage and Rocket Giving Fund out there. So we're very heavily involved in the golf space, and so that's where I come in to help them address all of those risks and legal issues from both the strategic and then an operational side as well. So happy to be here today to talk about golf and a golf related incident that happened with that a lot of people don't think about when they think about golf carts, golf risk, and things of the like. So excited to be here to talk about it today.
Yeah, and it really it was such terrible news in the sports world because Jeff was, really legendary for like 30 years within the NFL as an agent and other ways. I and you can fill in the blanks if you know more, but the way I understand it, just based on my kind of, cursory read of reports, is that a group of them, including John Elway, had been at Stagecoach in California, and they were not going to go back the following day. I guess John Elway had a house in the golf community, and a caravan of them, maybe like 10 or 15 people, was headed up to his house that evening. Um, Reports are saying that Jeff was on the back of the golf cart that was being operated by John Elway, and for whatever reason, I mean, I haven't seen anything further about the why, but for whatever reason, he fell backwards off of the golf cart, hit his head, and later died from his injuries. I do think before we get started, it's really important to note that police reports are stating that there wasn't any, drug or alcohol element to this accident. It was really just a very, very tragic accident. Um, that being said, when you have any kind of tragic accident on on any premises, you're opening yourself up to risk and liability. And this one is a little bit more nuanced. I would think you'll have to tell us, but I would think it's a little more nuanced because we're dealing with a private club, and also I don't know if this factors in, but private members of that club. So that's where you come in, and it sounds like your expertise is on point for that. Do you have any further information about the accident, or does that pretty much cover what you know too?
I think that pretty much covers what I know. I think what's kind of important to think about when we're looking at like liability and risk assessment of this incident is how these people were positioned on the golf cart. Now, this is what it seems to be from the current reporting. They haven't thrown any pictures out or anything, but this is a two-person golf cart with the holders for the golf bags on the back, right? The ones that strap over on the back. Um, and on that back area where the golf bags are typically strapped in, that's where Jeff Spurbeck was back there, along with another individual on the back. And then it was John Elway and his wife up in the front. So two-person golf cart, four people on it. We can start to see what, where some of the risks might be if we were to look at it, with hindsight being 2020 and all. But I think that layout of how they may have been in the golf cart will actually help us out a little bit when we start looking to the risks involved and where liability might be placed.
Okay, yeah, and see, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a two-person golf cart. So certainly, from I mean, they're not at this stage, but certainly from a litigation standpoint, that would matter down the road. So,
Yeah.
just to give it a little bit more context, from your standpoint, working with golf-related legal issues, how do you interpret this tragedy? I mean, what are the key legal concerns that operators should be paying attention to with incidents like this?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple parties here who want to take a look that they might not be directly involved, right? You have an event such as Stagecoach, that right, they were all at the day party related to that event, and those events give VIPs golf carts quite often, right? So they'll give them golf carts to go to and from off property, especially if there's a high value community close to where a lot of them are staying, right? Whether they own homes there, they're renting homes there, so a lot of those events will give golf carts for ease of transportation. You also then have the golf club community itself. Now, these private golf club communities are unique in the fact that it's a community built around the premise that you're going to go out and use the golf course that's right next to or adjacent to the community. And so again, you'll see a lot of people with the golf carts within that community. Now, in places like in California, which is where this takes place, golf carts are considered motor vehicles for all intents and purposes. Whether it's statutorily in the criminal code or whether it's based on how they have some of their language in their CC&Rs, most of the time golf carts are going to be considered motor vehicles. And so we'll kind of fall into the same purview of the rules and regulations you would find there. But people don't always treat it that way. So it's interesting to think about how that will play out and how that'll have an effect. I also think, when you look at the golf course itself and how they let people go not only around to the golf course or up and around the community. So you'll have a lot of these golf carts who are typically reserved for the golf course, right? And the cart paths. And so you're really restricted to that area. You're not supposed to take it out into the HOA community, even if it's an HOA golf community there. So I think, again, there's a lot of those nuances that we don't really know about right now and how that goes plays. But it's interesting to think about when you're an operator in any of those spaces that, hey, we probably should take, I mean, again, this is a tragedy. It's been very sad. And thoughts and prayers go out to the Spurbeck family. But hopefully this does bring to light some of the golf cart safety issues that are out there and causes some of these people to start to take a look on, how are we enforcing some of our rules that we have around the use of golf carts in and around our premises or in our events.
Well, and I mean, to that end, do you find that in these, I'm kind of going off course here, but in these private golfing communities, are there standard rules and regulations concerning the operation of golf carts, or is it kind of a case by case, club by club situation?
Yeah, it's generally a case by case, club by club situation, but the prevailing advice of those clubs, so if they've done things the right way, which I'm sure that they have, they'll have not only their waivers that set out their rules and regulations for operations of the golf carts, but they'll also have golf cart rules because many of these people will bring their own premium golf carts to the course, right? So they're not always the golf carts that are on the course themselves. So if people own their own golf carts, they'll still have a set of rules like, hey, you can't be taking these on the greens, for example, right? Like things like that seem pretty simple to those of us around golf, but that everybody may not know and they want to make sure it enforced. Sometimes those will really just be around the game of golf and the rules and etiquette around golf cart usage on a golf course. But when you have these HOA communities, how it should go out is it should expand further into where you can use your golf cart, things like you can't be driving under the influence with your golf cart in the area. They'll have some of those, again, what we may think is common sense things, but they'll have those as actual rules. And again, if they ever got to a stage of litigation, it'd be very important to see what those rules were. And if people knew about them going ahead of time.
What about like driver qualifications? I mean, if they are considered motor vehicles for all intents and purposes, would a club, necessarily have any type of specific qualification in place? I mean, obviously you don't want, 8-year-olds driving golf carts, but I don't know. Is that again a case by case situation?
Yeah, a lot of times they'll have it to where you either have to be 16 years and up, or you'll, especially in some of these like more private, most prestigious clubs, I think the rules get a little looser the more public that a course or a community gets, and then they kind of take it on a case by case. But you'll have it to where have to have a valid driver's license, 16 years and older, right, or accompanied by an adult. And then you'll have some of those things. Some will go so far, I know, at least from the event side, to where if you're giving someone a golf cart, you're going to take a copy of their driver's license, make sure that they're, run a quick check to see if they have any negative marks on that driver's license, and then kind of look at the driving record there. But I think that that's more for the premium event side. I'm not sure the club would go that route. But again, another interesting thing to say: will more of those processes be developed in light of accidents like this?
Golf itself, with courses and communities, such as these, are generally seen as leisure spaces. So, how do you, I guess, help your clients balance that perception with the very real chance and, reality of liability risks?
Yeah. It's a good question because most people think we're just going for a round of golf. It's laid back. It's not as risky as if someone was playing a full contact sport, such as football, rugby, things like. So they kind of put those in two categories. However, with the equipment that's involved in golf, right, from the golf carts to the golf clubs to the balls themselves and how they're made, you have some really serious ways that people could get injured, and so the risks are still real. I mean, you see back when netting was first going up around baseball, the as people were getting hurt, that golf had been having to do that for their private houses that were backed up to golf courses for a while, right? Because of some of the damage that has happened. So, golf has had some of the same issues, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been taken in light. So, what I try to do when I advise my clients is to look at some of the rowdier events of golf, right? And I think that's a good perspective. You'll see some of the live events, right? Because that's their whole thing. They want the party hole, they have all
Right.
that. Or, I'm based out of Phoenix. We got Waste Management open over here, which is a great time, and they get a little rowdier there than at your traditional golf event. And so I say, look at some of these examples and see where even the game is progressing, right? Because right now we may still consider it a leisure sport. Its demographic may be different than what we're assigning from a risk perspective. However, the game is going towards getting riskier and riskier in the sense that it's going to be more involved. We're going to have more high value, exciting activations out at golf course at golf events. You're going to have golf courses who are going to try to, whether you're doing night golf, which is getting bigger and bigger out here, whether you're doing new and exciting things around the actual architecture and agronomy of the course itself, there's going to come some risk. So the way that golf is progressing is for more risk, but for more benefit of the people who are involved. So I think the game is changing, and that's helping at least my clients and the people that I work with understand that our risk assessments of that also has to change.
Sure. Well, and I mean, and alcohol is so prevalent at these events too, and so that's just an added complication to what could go wrong. So, like going back to we were talking about golf carts and standard of care and rules and regulations. What is, if anything, the standard of care that a golf cart driver would have to his or her passengers?
Yeah. So I think here you have to look at your typical negligence standard, almost as if you were evaluating it as a normal motor vehicle, which, like I said, in the state of California, they do for most purposes. So, do they have a duty to their passengers? Yes. What's that duty to drive safe and responsibly, as a reasonable person would in like circumstances, right? Then you
Sure.
have to look to see, did they breach that duty? And I think that's where it gets interesting with cases such as this, because whereas we have more norms of operation with traditional motor vehicles, it's a different story for golf carts, right? Especially when you're thinking of the traditional usage on the course and cart paths, et cetera. So where here they're on a more common road and they're going in a community, you can kind of take it back to your normal rules of the road, I would say. Um, and then, did that breach of duty, if there was one, did that cause the damages that person incurred? So you're going to go through that same analysis that you would for a motor vehicle accident for the driver. And I think that's where this one gets interesting. And we talked about rules a little bit already, but a big aspect of this could be, were there rules that were violated? Maybe it wasn't, John Elway wasn't negligent in his driving of the vehicle. In the sense that he was driving reasonably, he was part of a caravan, they were all going at reasonable speed. All of those things could be true, but if there were rules that people weren't holding onto the back of the golf cart, there still could be um, some liability risk there. And so I think that's what comes interesting to do the rules of either the community or whoever he got the golf cart from, if it wasn't his own golf cart, do those rules come into play to say, yeah, he did breach the duty of care as he was driving that golf cart? So be
Right.
interesting to
And
see.
yeah, and I mean, in a case like this, there are always going to be a number of potential parties. So I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have the venue, we could have the golf cart company, we could have the individuals involved, we could have the club. I mean, the possibilities are endless from a risk and liability standpoint. Um, Let me ask you, when incidents do occur, I guess, say involving carts, or we were talking about stray balls a minute ago, how do you assess whether the course or the event, met its obligations?
Yeah, good question. A lot of it is getting there really quickly. You're getting someone involved out there to kind of do that fact finding right away. So, obviously here because there was a tragedy and someone, that sustained serious injury who later ended up passing away, there was an investigation right away. So a lot of those details came through, but that's not always the same case on your typical golf course, right? Someone may have gotten hit by a golf ball, or there may have been a golf cart accident that happened out in a part of the golf course where there aren't a lot of people and nobody would have noticed for a while. So getting there and finding out right away what happened is very important. That's kind of the first step. Once you do that analysis, you kind of do that fact finding. The next part of it in trying to figure out who's going to have this responsibility is just, what actions took place, right? Like and it seems so silly to say, but sometimes was a golf cart driven up this hill, right? Well, okay, well then we know, generally what happened if it's flipped over, right? But
Sure.
if if a ball went through a window, for example, right, or if a ball hit someone, you have to look at all the different firing angles that ball could have came from, because I myself, I'm not a great golfer, and I'll admit that here, right? My handicap is nothing to brag about. And so it's very possible that I could have been at a completely unrelated hole and that ball still got back over there, right? So
Right.
it's just some of those things are part of the fact finding process there. But once you figure that out, it does get interesting when you look at, especially with golf carts, was an equipment failure, right? Is there
Mhm.
something with the golf cart that caused the issue rather than the driver? Was it the course condition, right? Is there something
Sure.
there? When the agronomy guys went out there and doing their stuff on the course in the morning, did they leave equipment out there, right? Did they not cover some of the tubing and wiring on whatever it was that they were working on, and then that's what ended up causing the golf cart to tip over, something like that, right? So
Right.
there's a number of different ways to do it, but I think that you're looking at big areas of property on golf courses, right? It's just a lot of area that there's a lot of angles and a lot of different, um, I guess, causal steps that could happen to really cause an incident there. So trying to identify all those right away is kind of the most pivotal thing.
Sure. And I guess, taking that a step further, how strong is the assumption of risk defense in the golf cart accident context?
Yeah,
I mean, and
it's
also, how would you position that, when defending a claim?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because assumption of risk in sport is such a strong defense, right? Because we all know that are involved with sport that when you go out there onto a golf course, there are some risks latent in the game of golf, right? So that's just the fact of it. And you see that the same with the game of football, the game of hockey, right? You'll see that same type of defense. And so normally that defense is employed when you are a participant in the sport itself, right? So if you're the one actually playing golf, you're the one playing football, etc. However, it does also apply to spectators, fans. So it kind of depends on where you sit in there on how strong your assumption of claim is, right? If you are walking past the golf course in a community and not on the golf course, you're just going for a morning walk, that assumption of risk defense is going to be a lot less tenable when they're just walking by the golf course and they're not actually participating in the game of golf in any sense. But when you are involved in the game of golf, or if you're going on a golf cart, right, and uh, as a part of that you're getting in a motor vehicle,
Hmm.
I think that um, the defense starts to take a turn when you look at some of the rules and stuff like that. Are you typically supposed to be on a part of that part of the golf cart, right? If it's four seater and you're sitting on the back, right, that's very typical. So you assume the risk of sitting back there because you know generally what to expect, right?
Sure.
Whereas if you're doing something else, like again in this situation, which is why I brought it up earlier, or where the golf bags are, right? While you may be assuming some of the risk of that, that doesn't necessarily fall within the traditional assumption of risk analysis that happens in sport, where it's just a latent part of the game, because those carts were designed for golf clubs to be back there, not for people. So, well, there will still be some of that depending on the context, right? And we don't know all the information, obviously, with this situation. But I think that assumption of risk is a real defense. And if I was to defend one of my clients, right,
Mhm.
and saying that, okay, someone got injured on one of our properties or at one of our events, that would be the first thing is were they involved in the game of golf or in the particular event? Are they a bystander? Are they a spectator? Once I figure that out, then it's going to be okay. How much did they know about the risk that they would have been taking? Right? Do they know that people aren't supposed to be on the back of these golf carts here? Right? Did we do
Right.
a good enough job? Making that known, whether it's through our rules or waivers or signage, right? Did we do our job with that so that they could assume that risk? If they chose to take that action. And so I think that'd be the analysis. And then, after going through that, you'd be able to tell, okay, well, this person had knowledge of what they were doing and what risks they were assuming versus they had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, this is so early in the investigation on this case, so we don't know what the signage situation was. We don't know what the maintenance situation was. And you touched on that a second
Yeah.
ago, but I do want to ask you about that. Because I have seen and had cases like this. When a plaintiff claims, poor course design or maintenance issues caused an accident or an injury, what factors would y'all, I guess, review to rebut that if necessary?
Oh yeah, it's a big deal, especially with golf carts that are on either on a course, on an outstanding like on a regular basis. So they're general use golf carts that have been out there, or even on one-time use event golf carts. You're gonna look and see first, okay, where did these golf carts come from? How long have they been in operation? All the way to like who was doing the maintenance on these golf carts in the interim, and what kind of checks is there a record of that? So as I'm sure you've seen yourself, like those I guess links in the chain of the maintenance of that golf cart are very important. So
Yeah.
a lot of times golf courses will do it themselves, right? So they have staff on hand that will go ahead and do the maintenance of the golf carts. But when you're renting from an event company, which could be the case, again, we don't know for sure on this one, but with something like a stagecoach, right? If they had golf carts that they were giving out to VIPs or something like that, they're just going to rent them from another party who may have another third party involved doing the maintenance. So it could get interesting, and like you alluded to earlier, there are a lot of different parties who could possibly be involved. We don't know in this case, but a lot of people could be involved depending on some of these facts as we find them going forward. But it's very interesting as you see, depending on the party who does the maintenance and whether it was an actual manufacturer defect or a maintenance defect, right?
Right.
Was there an issue there? And then each golf cart driver does have some small responsibility to maintenance, right? And so also seeing, was it something that the driver, as they were loading up the golf cart, is that something that they should have fixed or done, right? Is it a strap that was loose that they didn't tighten up? Things like that. So it
But
does get
you're talking
interesting
about,
with this.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're talking about maintenance
No.
with the golf cart, but what if we're dealing with, like, you know, allegations of poor course design, and so then we're veering into a premises liability suit, and then we have a heightened standard of
Yeah.
care, and we have invitees, and just a lot of other factors that would not otherwise be a part of this suit. I mean, what would you examine in that case to rebut that claim?
Yeah, I think with courses it gets real interesting because as you are, because the maintenance of a course is almost an art form in itself. I've talked about agronomy a little bit, and for any of our listeners who are not familiar with that word, it's typically referring to the actual like landscaping and maintenance of the golf course itself, right? You look to the agronomy professionals to make those fast greens. That's really exciting to see on TV when we're watching a PGA Tour event, or have the really clean, low cut grass for people like me who aren't great at golf to make it easier for me to hit it when I'm not in the fairway, right?
Right.
So it gets interesting again because it is a little bit of an art form. Whereas you may have some more traditional standards when it comes to most premises when you have a premises liability case. With here, you will have to take into effect that, you know, that elevation of that hill or of that parkway could have been for the overall course design aesthetic at some point and some of it actual function. So, um, you know, when you look into the reasonableness of the maintenance and care of the golf carts, you'll have to take to account whether or not some of that maintenance took place for one of those specific purposes, and was that reasonable, right? Rather than if you're looking at it from just a pure safety perspective, right? Because if we were just looking at pure safety perspective, we may not get cart paths that are at such a steep incline and things like that, but then that would take away from the play of the course. So those are the type of things that you would look at, which make it non-traditional when it comes to a premises liability claim on a golf course,
Yeah,
at least.
right. Especially that I didn't think about that, the aesthetic element and the reasonableness of that. And so and again, we don't know what we're dealing with in the Spurbeck case, but I mean these are just all things that could come up. I know we're running short on time. I want to ask you a couple more things. Um, what kind of documentation or protocols do you advise operators to maintain to show that they are proactively addressing golf cart safety?
Yeah, I think again that golf cart safety has been something that's been overlooked for a long time, and so putting in, if operators don't already have, a very blatant, these are rules and regulations of our use of the golf cart. Here's the waiver that we want you to acknowledge these and make sure that people actually read them and understand them, right?
Mhm.
To have both of those in is the baseline. I feel like that should be standard no matter what. I think that if you are doing it more high profile, or if there was any chance that the golf cart could be taken out into outside of the golf course and onto a local, whether it's a local road, a main road, right? Whether or not the golf cart itself is street legal or not, um, you should also be doing the driver qualifications that we talked about earlier and evaluating those and making sure that you have driver's licenses on file. I think that those are very low impact to the operations that would have a great deal of impact to the risk that you're taking on from giving out those golf carts. So I think, again, that would be the baseline that I would recommend to all of my clients. And I think that going forward, you also need to make sure that you are capping the amount of people who can be on certain golf carts. So it's a two-person golf cart, right? Really capping that at two people and making sure that that's known. And then again, even four-person golf carts, you'll see where people will try to, fit together 5 or 6 people on a golf cart and just trying to eliminate some of that as much as possible. You'll also have to have some type of, you know, at least letting your staff know to look out for those things as well and to help, uh, identify those issues as they're going on. And that just comes with, when you think of a large scale golf event, it's a lot of volunteers, right? I mean, most of those events don't work without hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. So making sure that it's part of the volunteer training if you're running a large scale event would be, I think, the other point as well.
Okay. Well, and just touching on waivers, you know, in my practice, I run into a lot of premises issues and I run into a lot of waiver issues. And I think it's pretty typical for, waivers to be enforceable if they meet certain requirements for adults. But obviously that is not the case with minors. Is that kind of what you have found as well? That's not what we're dealing with in this
Yeah.
case. Golf courses in general.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's still the whole, like, it's better to have it than not, right?
Right.
But also making sure that you have a legal guardian or a parent present if you are going to allow any of the usage of the golf carts to minors, and make sure that you have a specialized waiver for those parents that is separate, and so that they understand what they're agreeing to that as well. But to your point, right, it's the enforceability of those are a lot different. I think that's where also you need to have some latitude as an operator to be able to say, hey, we understand that you're willing to sign a waiver for this child to be permitted on the golf cart, but we're not comfortable because of these circumstances. So to have that ability to say no as well, in some very limited circumstances.
Sure. Well, and just what about enforceability with adults? I mean, what is your, are these waivers typically enforceable?
Yeah, again, to an extent, right, depending on if they meet the qualifications. And the biggest thing is that they're understandable, right? Like, you don't want a waiver out there that's been chat GPT'd or over legalese, or kind of like my two favorite things that happen nowadays with some of these waivers, right? And to have something that makes sense to the individual reader, that's generally the biggest thing. If the people who are signing the waiver understands what rights they're giving up, and those are, at least weighted to close to a degree of what they're getting out of signing the waiver, right? Use of a golf cart, being able to be on the course, those type of things, then I think we can see those being enforceable from the adults level to a much much more comfortable degree. Now, it's not always perfect, right? As I'm sure you've experienced, and waivers only get you so far. But there's a lot of other
Right.
things that go around them, but it's still better to have it, and it does strengthen your position as an operator right away, right? And by orders of magnitude. So definitely
Yeah,
really important to have.
for sure, for sure. Better to have it than not. What insurance pitfalls do you, I guess, often see in these cases, and how can operators avoid costly gaps in coverage?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that people don't realize is that there is specialized golf cart insurance, and I highly recommend it for those operators out there who want to address golf cart related risks because, you know, vehicle liability isn't going to cover you there, even if you're a private person with your own golf cart, right? It's going to be, golf carts are going to be specifically excluded out of that policy 90% of the time or more. And then, unless you're on an actual, like within one of these golfing communities, within one of the properties themselves, one of the houses, you're going to fall out of the property insurance as well. So there's no real area for coverage in either of, except for if you're on property itself. And so I would highly, highly recommend specialized golf cart insurance for anybody that could be using a golf cart outside of the actual property itself. Now, that being said, if you're doing a large event and the margins on some of these events or some of these hospitality situations aren't great all the time, right? And so you don't want to get over inundated with some of the insurance coverage you're getting, but that's where you want to make sure, okay, if we don't have specific golf cart liability, does our umbrella coverage really do what we need it to do to cover us off after our GL policy? And I think that knowing that and having that analysis on the front part before you're organizing an event or a hospitality area or a specialized activation that involves golf carts is important, and why maybe it's something our listeners take away today. That would be great, right? To know that that's
This
something
is
that
good
they want to
information.
address. They want to address, but yeah, I think that that's the biggest gap is people don't realize that if you want to cover golf carts outside of a specialized golf cart policy, you're going to have to rely on some type of umbrella coverage or overhanging policy like that.
I'm at a specialty insurance conference right now, and I feel like I need to hunt somebody down today and impart all this new knowledge on them that I've gotten from you. So, but that
Yeah,
no,
just
really,
really like, tell me about the golf cart policies. Yeah, I think
right.
that'd be great.
Let's talk more about this. Okay, well, listen, I just to kind of bring it all home, and we've touched on this on and off, through the podcast, but with the Elway situation, the Spurbeck situation specifically, what potential liabilities, you know, might a defense attorney anticipate if, or maybe even when, this becomes a lawsuit? I
Yeah,
have
I
opinions on
mean,
that as well.
yeah. No, and I'd love to hear your take. I mean, to your earlier point, like there's so many people that could be included in the lawsuit, and more likely than not, they would be, right? So if you're trying to defend a lot of those aspects, you got to know that not only is John Elway and his family going to be involved, right? Because his wife is also present, especially when in depending on where it gets filed, most likely in California. But you'll have to have both parties as part of the lawsuit. You'll then also there was a third individual who was a friend of John Elway's son who was there, right? Apparently, he from again what's been reported, I think by TMZ is that he was trying to resuscitate or save Mr. Spearbeck after the fall. And so we get into some of that, Good Samaritan type of liability to where, did he do the things that he was supposed to, et cetera. So he could be involved there, um, as well as the community, right? And the golf course. Now, we don't know specifically where they got the golf carts from, if they got it from, if it's their private golf carts, if it's something they got from the club or it's something they got from Stagecoach. But in any event, they're going to look at whoever the owner of their golf cart was. Did they maintain a golf cart properly? And so I think that you'll have all those types of claims from a plaintiff side on this to see, hey, these are all the things that could have gone wrong or probably did go wrong that made this tragic accident, which does seem like a tragic accident. Again, no reports of alcohol or anything else or drugs at the time. And so if that's the case, then they're going to be looking at all of these different avenues of liability. So, I mean, what do you think?
No, I mean, I agree. It's just kind of, we know so little about it now, but it's really going to be kind of a process of elimination for them on,
Yeah.
which strategy, which theory they're going to run with. I would imagine if it were me and I was on the other side of the bar, I would probably have experts out there yesterday looking at golf carts and maintenance, and so that they can have their ducks in a row. But there are an endless number of parties that could be involved in a lawsuit, in this type of situation. So we'll see how it plays out. But it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Before we close, in your experience, I guess, when do third parties like equipment manufacturers and maintenance vendors become key to shifting or sharing liability? And you've already touched on this a bit too, but if you could just kind of, give us a brief summary of what you think there.
Yeah, no, I think when you have a situation, I think this is a good one to where all signs right now show that John Elway was not doing anything that he wasn't supposed to as far as the actual operation of the golf cart itself, right? So again, no drugs, no alcohol, part of a caravan, as long as they were going a reasonable speed, which hasn't been noted yet. Then that's when you start to look, okay, well, if all of those things were done correctly, then was an equipment failure. That's when we're going to look at that probably next, right? That's probably the next thing. And then after that, you're going to start looking at, conditions of the area, right? Especially in one of these communities that has a bigger HOA. This is a high value community. It's going to be looked at. And so you try and see what's going on there. So I think that you start to get into the equipment stage once the actual people involved seem to have behaved reasonably. But generally it's the people, not the equipment.
Not the equipment, right?
Most times.
Right. And
But
again,
I do
no
like to
evidence
blame
of that
my
here.
golf clubs.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No evidence of it here, and I do always blame my golf clubs on the golf course generally for my play. So I would, likely do the same in almost any context.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Okay. Well, Seth, this has been really, really interesting. Again, this is such a tragic situation, but I mean, it is very on point in terms of liability issues that these types of clubs and, golf cart companies need to be aware of. I think we've pretty much covered everything I have. You have anything you need to add?
No, I think that's great. It's been fun talking about it, and it's been good to talk about these issues again from a liability side and some of the concerns that operators might have out there. So thanks for having me on and for chatting.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. It was a lot of fun.